British Columbia, my home province in Canada, has started a referendum. The issue is a reform to our electoral system. British Columbians will be deciding on two things. First, does it want to change from its current electoral system to a new system with proportional representation? Second, if a change occurs, which electoral system does it want to replace the current one? What do we need to consider about this? First, what's our current system? Our current system is called first past the post. With first past the post, the province is divided into a large number of districts, called ridings, and each one holds its own election when it's time to vote. The ballot lists each candidate running in your riding, and every voter is allowed to vote for precisely one of these candidates. Each vote goes to the candidate that it's cast for, and at the end, the candidate with the most votes becomes the MLA for that riding. If one party has a majority of the MLAs, then the party's leader becomes the premier. Sometimes, no party has a majority, and then it's up to the parties to negotiate with each other until a majority can agree and a premier is selected. For an example of this, as I'm recording this, the Liberal Party has the most seats in the legislature, but they have less than 50%. The NDP had a comparable number of seats, and the Green Party held enough to push either party over the tipping point. On the conclusion of the election, the Green Party opened up negotiations with both parties, and eventually agreed to support the NDP's bid for power, making their leader the premier, in what is referred to as a coalition government. This system, however, is not without its flaws. In the example I gave where parties A, B, and C competed, you may have noticed that the winning candidate got less than 50% of the vote, and in some cases the approval rating of a newly elected candidate will not just be less than 50%, it can even be less than the number of people who voted for the candidate. This can happen, in particular, when people feel like they're being forced to vote for someone not because it's the candidate that they want, but because it's the most popular candidate that opposes a candidate that they fear. Furthermore, a system like this can leave many people unrepresented. In a rather infamous case that happened here in BC only a few election cycles ago, the Liberal Party won an election with barely more than 50% of the vote, but with that amount held 77 out of 79 of the seats. A party with only a little over 50% of the vote held 97% of the seats. Proportional representation is a proposed solution to this. The idea is that under one of these systems, your vote will be more likely to count no matter who you vote for. There are three systems being proposed at this time. They are dual member proportional, or DMP, mixed member proportional, or MMP, and rural-urban proportional, or RUP. I'll review how each one works in that order. First, dual member proportional. The idea is that most of our ridings will be combined with a neighboring riding. Parties will then submit two candidates to each riding, a primary candidate and a secondary candidate. Independents can also apply. Then, the voting begins. Just like with first past the post, the first round begins by counting up the votes in each riding and giving them to the primary candidate. Like with first past the post, the primary candidate with the most votes gets a seat in the legislature. Now, here's where it gets different. The votes are now all counted up, and the popular vote for each party is checked against the percentage of candidates that actually got into the legislature. Provided a party got 5% of the vote or more, parties that are underrepresented now get secondary candidates added to the legislature. The party does not get to choose which secondary candidates are chosen. Rather, candidates are chosen from the ridings with the highest percentage of votes for the party in question. This continues, adding secondary candidates from the most underrepresented parties until the assembly is filled. By this method, the parties get representation approximately equal to the number of people willing to vote for them. Now, mixed member proportional. In mixed member proportional, two types of candidates are able to run. The first type are your normal candidates, each of which runs in a riding. The second are candidates representing larger regions made up of several ridings. Voters then vote on their ballots, once for their preferred candidate within the riding, and once for their preferred party. The candidate does not need to match the party. First, the candidate votes are added up, and candidates are elected in a manner similar to first past the post. Then the party votes are added up within the larger region. The candidates are added from that region's candidate pool, favoring parties underrepresented in comparison to the percentage of the vote that the party in question got. This continues until the region has the appropriate number of candidates. This system is the only one on the referendum currently in use in other countries. The countries in question include New Zealand and Germany. Finally, rural-urban proportional. To understand rural-urban proportional, you must first understand single transferable votes, or STV. This system has already been voted on before, but to review, in STV, ridings are combined together into much larger ridings with many more candidates. A specified number of seats will be available to a riding. Voters will then be asked to rank candidates from most preferred to least preferred. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just like that. First place votes are then counted until a quota is met. Once the quota is met, that candidate is elected, and any extra votes they had are transferred to other candidates based on the second place votes. If no candidate gets enough votes, then the candidate with the least votes gets all their votes transferred to the candidate marked second on their ballots. This process continues until all seats are filled. Now, when this came up for a vote last time, there was some concern that combining ridings like this would drown out rural voices. So here is the proposed solution: rural-urban proportional. The province is split into rural and urban regions. Urban regions get STV. Rural regions get MMP. That way, everyone gets a form of proportional representation and no one drowns out anyone. Well, except by having overwhelming support like in any functioning democracy. So there you have it. Hopefully I've given you all a good explanation, and you can now mail in your referendum votes without fear of having a misinformed decision. I don't know how you're going to vote, and I'm not going to tell you how. You'll either vote for proportional representation or against it, and you'll rank the three alternatives to your own preference. Good luck, and have a happy referendum. Don't forget to mail in your votes.